Now, this is the first show in a 12-show series that we're going to be doing at this time and on this channel for the next 12 weeks. So, Stephen, today we're talking about what?
Well, we're talking about the cross. We're going to talk about the origin of the cross, what the cross means about Christ, and how Christ suffered on the cross for our sins and the entire world.
Okay, I think that's great because, you know, as some of you saw in the introduction that we just played here, those are all crosses that you can just find commonly. I mean, a lot of them are just on tops of churches and all over the place. It did not take us very long just driving around looking for crosses to find, you know, a lot. I mean, that image is out there. I mean, I think everyone's seen a cross, a crucifix, or something to that end. And the real question is, well, what's the big deal? I mean, what is the big deal, Stephen? Why is everyone running around with this cross? And that's really what we're going to talk about tonight. Now, you said you have some history. What is the history of the cross?
Well, I want to give a brief history, and then we'll get into deeper subject matter.
Okay.
Keep in mind that ever since the garden, man has been treating man bad. Ever since Cain killed Abel, and sin entered into the world, the first murder. Satan truly hates man, and he will do anything he can to destroy Christians, or by any means take out the church. Now, the children of Israel, they actually went through 6 empires. They went through the Egyptian Empire, the Assyrian Empire, the Babylonian, the Persian, the Grecian, and the Roman. Now, the Persians were probably the ones who originated crucifixion. This is what you call modern-day Iran. When the Persian Empire fell by the Grecian Empire, right around 7th century, Alexander the Great actually introduced it into his empire, and he actually crucified one of his own generals.
Nice.
For not obeying part of his plan. When the Roman Empire came on the scene and destroyed the Grecian, they absorbed all their culture, and they adopted this custom actually for slaves, rebels, and especially despised enemies and criminals. It's very interesting. A Roman citizen actually was exempt from this type of torture, unless it was some type of treason. They would be.
So if they were like caught in treason, then,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah. Now, there was a famous man by the name of Spartacus. He actually did live. He was a gladiator, and he actually rebelled against the Roman Empire. He was actually killed in battle, but 6,000 of his followers were actually crucified on a road going to Rome. They were on the crosses. This was like a warning to all people. If you rebel against the Roman Empire, you shall be crucified. There's some famous people here. Peter was actually crucified upside down. There might be some debate over that. Andrew, he was crucified on something called the famous X cross, or St. Andrew's cross. It's a cross like this. There was a gentleman named Archbishop Joachim. I think I pronounced that right. In 1920, was actually crucified on the royal doors of the cathedral in Russia.
Nice.
So this is something that's been going on since the Persian Empire. Now, a common thing about before crucifixion, there was a scourging. Now, the Romans, they actually perfected this thing.
Wait a minute. Hold up. Before we get into that, though, let's start with, because I know you're getting ready to talk about the beating and the scourging,
Yeah.
and that's a really important thing. But let's talk about what happened to Jesus in the garden first, that really, if you will, set him up for that.
Well, we had Jesus going into the garden praying, and he actually, there's something happened. What do you call it in the medical term?
Hematidrosis is actually the medical term, and what it literally is it's a medical condition where you're going through so much anxiety, so much stress, that a chemical is released that begins to deteriorate the capillaries around your sweat glands, or right around your sweat glands.
Wow.
So what happens is blood mixes with the sweat, and so as you sweat, you are literally sweating blood and sweat at the same time.
Wow.
I know a lot of people have probably heard that passage or seen that passage about
Yeah.
Jesus sweating blood and went, "Come on, give me a
Yeah.
break." That never happened. But it's not only possible that there are medical accounts of it happening in other situations. So it did happen, and one of the side effects to that, Stephen, which is very fascinating to me, is that tenderizes or sensitizes your skin wherever that occurred. So imagine for me, for a minute, that you've gone through this and I just touch you.
Right.
You're going to be in amazing agony just from me touching you. And then we go on and we see Jesus before the high priest, and he's getting beaten,
Right.
punched in the face. I mean,
Right.
just brutal,
Right.
brutal beating. I mean, can you imagine how painful that would be? I can't.
No.
I mean, I can't even imagine.
No.
And then they lead him before Pilate, and then we get to the scourging.
Sure.
Now, you describe the scourging, because I mean, I have some interesting descriptions of that as well. I mean, it's a brutal, brutal thing.
Now, from my research, we have the Romans. They were the force of the day. They were the empire of the day. And when they scourged somebody, they really scourged somebody like big time. They would use a device called a cat of nine tails. Now, on the end of the tail, it would be either bone, metal, glass, or sometimes it would be like a little ball. And the whole idea of this whip was to tear skin. Huge amounts of blood would be lost. Also, the men would actually carry a beam. Contrary to belief, a lot of people think that Christ carried a cross, but actually it was a beam, and they carried a beam to their place of execution to another beam that was already in the ground. The men would be hoisted up. They would be nailed, usually. Nails were like 5 to 7 inches long, roughly 3/8 of an inch wide. Before a person died on the cross, usually the Romans broke their leg to hasten their death. Now, there's some debate on the nails. We commonly believe that Jesus was crucified here, but you're saying there's a possibility that Christ might have been crucified in the wrist.
Yeah, there have actually been, through archaeological digs, there have been bodies recovered who were crucified.
Yeah.
And what we're finding is that the damage to their arms was not in the palm, where most people see the image of Christ being crucified, but it was actually down in between these two bones in your wrist area. And I know a lot of people would say, well, in the Bible it says it was in his hands, and so we have to believe that. But you have to understand the original language here. The original language does not consider any difference between the hand or the wrist as we do.
So that would be considered a hand.
It would still be considered the hand.
Mm-hmm.
But the Romans did that because, to be as graphic as possible, if you put a nail through this part of your hand and that much body weight is being pulled on it, it will simply tear the flesh, and they will fall forward. The individual will fall forward. But if you put the nail here, it does support the body weight. It does support where the person is, and there on the cross,